Everyone, welcome back to Immediate Movie Reactions. I'm here after seeing The Iron Claw, the last movie of 2023 that I really wanted to see. I'm not sure what it is. I am not a biopic fan. I am not a wrestling fan, but this one had me interested. It is directed by Sean Durkin. I don't know his stuff, written by Sean as well. I don't really know his stuff, but I think based on the strength of this film, I would go back and check out some of his other work. Zac Efron plays Kevin, who is the sort of oldest brother. The actual oldest brother, um, they kind of write off. They just say he dies as a child. They don't really talk too much about how that happens. There's actually quite a bit in this film that they really gloss over. Holt McCallany is the patriarch of this family. He plays Fitz, a semi-successful wrestler who is now got kind of Uncle Rico syndrome and is living, dance mom through his kids and forcing them to become wrestlers and to become champions. Jeremy Allen White is in this as Kerry Von Erich, and he is an Olympic discus thrower. But unfortunately, it's at that time when the Olympics were in Moscow, and Jimmy Carter, I believe it was Jimmy Carter, pulls us out as a protest against Russia, which, understandable. Now his life is kind of thrown into turmoil, so he falls into wrestling as well. And then over the course of the film, we see how their life is dominated by the father Fitz and also by wrestling itself and what they have to do to their bodies. It doesn't get too much. There was some a moment where I was worried that it was going to become standard music biopic fare, right? Where they were going to start to get famous and then they meet the girls and then they do the drugs and yada, we know how that all. But unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm not really sure yet. It kind of just glosses over. It kind of, doesn't explore a lot of that. And I think that there's some real interesting bits of this family, the Von Erich family. Oh, Maura Tierney is also in this film, and I kind of forgot about that. She's not necessarily Emily Blunt style from Oppenheimer, where she's just there for having a body. Um, but she is there, and I guess towards the end of the film is able to do a little bit more. Uh, Tragically underused. But this is a story about Kevin. This is a story about how he's dealing with his brothers, how he's trying to take care of them, how he's trying to protect them from the father who isn't necessarily quite abusive, but definitely domineering. Definitely, if you're going to be tough enough, if you're going to be a man, when your brothers die, you don't cry, that sort of thing. You're putting on the show and kind of no matter what, sacrificing their happiness in many ways in pursuit of this wrestling belt. And, I think that that's where it's really interesting. The issue is there's a lot with this family that we don't see. We don't hear about, and I guess I understand, we don't hear about potentially the Nazi ties of the name. We don't hear about the other brother who isn't in this film at all that also died, right? They lost five of six boys, and this could have been a story about that, the mother and the father, the tragedy that they feel. Um, it does go a little bit into how Kevin is feeling and is he going to continue to wrestle? Well, he has to because he's known nothing else. His brothers are being taken away from him. He's never even dated as he's meets Pam, his becomes his wife, right? He's never even dated, and so in all those things, I think that there was a chance to build the characters up a little bit more. At the beginning of the film, I wasn't really enjoying it. I kind of felt like it was wrestling, if that makes sense, right? And sometimes you'll see in these films, you'll see actors acting like, hey, we're doing our role. We're trying really hard. And that's kind of what this was at the start of it. And I felt like I wanted to reach up to the screen and just kind of push it over because it was all clearly a set. Like nothing felt realistic. The film, as it progresses, though, as it becomes more about Kevin's story, and the father Fitz falls away, I think it becomes a little more endearing. It becomes a little more understandable. I definitely enjoyed that a lot more than I did early in the film. Um, I think the wrestling was really well done. It was up close. It was brutal. I felt like there were some real kind of cartoon comic characters. Ric Flair, Nature Boy Ric Flair, obviously not the real Ric Flair, is in this. and I don't know enough about the NWA and the wrestling and the sort of underground, um, but I know that this was definitely a zeitgeist. This is something that was important. I've always kind of done this thing with my kids where we do the claw, and that is the I never knew where that came from, but that this is the staple move. That is the trademark of this family. There are some things in there film wise that I didn't necessarily enjoy. There's one scene where the three boys decide that they're going to be a tag team, and they do sign a fade where it's one brother superimposed over the father, and like we get it, they're inextricably linked. Like they're all kind of one mentality. They're all working for each other, and they're all have their strings being pulled by the father. Okay, yeah, we get that. There's another where they're have to decide who's going to fight or go for the heavyweight championship, and the father, flips a coin, and heads it's Kevin, and tails it's David. Actually, I think it's the other way around. But anyway, it flips up and it's slow motion, and you don't see it because when it comes down, we're into the wrestling match as they're heading in. And I guess I like that they didn't do too much with that whole theatrical bit of it, but I would have liked a little bit more about just the brothers, and about their wrestling, and maybe their training, or why aren't they getting title shots, that sort of thing, because it kind of just keeps throwing things at us. And there's a lot, even on the history of this family, that they don't talk about. This idea of a curse. There's a lot in the immediate and in the extended family that could have been dealt with sort of on screen, but of course they need to take some dramatic license. They need to keep it to a reasonable time length, so they can't get into everything. But there were some issues I had, like as one brother dies and then almost immediately another brother dies. I would have liked to have seen, hey, 1982, they get their first, try at the belt. 1983, they train. 1984, they're getting another shot. 1986, they're going to Japan, right? Like, I would like to see some of these things so we know, you know, how long the family has been dealing with this tragedy and this trauma. I thought that that was a missed opportunity, but overall, the strength of the performance of Zac Efron uh, brings the movie together. Um, I wasn't so into it, but by the end, I really felt him. There's this weird sequence. So Jeremy Allen White ends up becoming a champion, but he takes his own life. There's actually, again, quite a bit of background there that could have been a whole story in itself, as he's dealing with drug addiction and steroids and everything. And he ends up taking his own life. And then there's this whole weird, like, Star Wars ghost sequence where he's back alive and he's meeting his brothers, and the two other brothers that we've seen die on screen. Then there's another little brother who died. It was the actual oldest brother, and I guess that was our time to be able to say goodbye to them. But I didn't feel like there was any character that we really cared that much about, except for Kevin, except for Zac Efron and his family. I think maybe if it had focused a little bit more on him and his family and what it's doing to them, as he's married and he's having kids, I, I would have been a little more invested in it. I did enjoy the film more when the father, towards the end, just kind of becomes a sideline character. He is definitely not the focus of this entire film. But overall, I think it was a solid film. It's something that I don't regret seeing. So see it, stream it, or skip it. I don't. Obviously, it's not going to be in theaters very long, so you're not going to have an opportunity. It's not one that I feel like you need to see in the theaters. So stream it when it comes out. I think it is. If you cry at movies, you will cry at this movie. Um, I didn't necessarily cry. I did get a little verklempt, right? I did choke up a little bit toward the end, as um, Kevin is watching his now young boys play and thinking back to the parallels of him and his brothers. And um yeah, I think thought that was a powerful. And that's the thing, is like, let's make it about that family a little bit more. um So yeah, that's kind of where we are. So yeah, definitely stream it. And I appreciate everyone. It's been a great 2023. And I will see you all after the next movie.